Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this workshop session about sharing PM2 and 3 using a prepared PowerPoint slide deck. Now, many of you may have seen the slide deck before, but there are several improvements that have been made to assist you in communicating EMSC data and information to your stakeholders. Our goals for this session are to learn more about how to facilitate a meeting, how to present data, and how to extract data from Tableau to use in your presentation. Some of our EMSC managers created their own presentations from the slide deck, and one manager shared that Tableau is a wonderful tool. I now understand my data. And another manager said, Tableau is such a great resource, and going through this process helped me to get more familiar. Tableau is your friend, and we hope you too will discover how easy it can be to share your data. Erica Kane kindly gave us permission to use Wisconsin as our demonstration state today, but you'll also see samples of data from unknown states as well that are being used with permission. So let's begin. First off, I want to take a look at the slide deck as a whole. There are so many options to choose from, and I won't be going over each of these slides in detail, but I do want to show you a few features that apply to each of these slides in this deck. Note first that there are several elements on the slide itself that you can edit. So for example, we have headers and we have subheaders here. We have spaces for logos, and it's very easy to change these to meet the needs of your state. So for example, in the state bracket, we could type in Wisconsin. And over here, if I wanted to change the logo, that's also very easy to do. Coming up to this top bar here, clicking on the Insert tab. And I have the Wisconsin logo located in Pictures. You can find it wherever it's located on your desktop. And I just can see Wisconsin EMSC logo right here. And then I click on Insert right here, and it will insert the slide right into my PowerPoint, or the picture right into my PowerPoint. Now I could leave it like this. I could move it, I could change shape or size. Lots of interesting, fun things that you can do here in PowerPoint, but we wanted to make it easy for you within the slide deck to just quickly insert things and change information. I kind of like the way it looks like this. So I'm going to be leaving this view that you see here in edit mode so that I can make and demonstrate things quickly and easily. Something else I want you to notice here on this slide is that there is a note section underneath each one of the slides. And you may see recommendations for facilitation, resources to videos and websites. There might be sample questions for engagement and suggested talking points for telling the story of your data. So you probably aren't going to see these notes going forward, but rest assured they are there and available in the slide deck template provided for you in Google Drive. And almost every single slide has something for you as a help or a really great tool. I'm just going to close this right here. And let's go ahead and talk about some facilitation strategies. First, have you ever been in a meeting where you did not know anyone? It can feel very isolating and stifle opportunities for discussion. So to facilitate communication in the group, the easiest thing to do is to conduct a welcome and introductions to get people talking early. Another great facilitation tool is to ask questions like the one on this slide. First, ask everyone to consider their answer to this question from their personal point of view, and then let everyone have a moment to think about their answer, and then ask everyone at the meeting to provide a verbal response to the question. So this question helps to create buy-in from the meeting participants, and it sets the tone for everyone speaking up. And you can create your own question as well. Like I mentioned before, every single slide, not every single slide, but most of the slides have suggested talking points. And a suggested talking point for this slide could be, today we're going to review the results for our state for EMSC2 regarding EMS agencies' access to a PEC and EMSC3 skill checking on pediatric equipment from data that was collected in 20, and you'd come up here and change the date. So if it was in 2017-18, you would change it to that. I'm just going to leave it as 2020 right here. Just make sure you put the correct date and that the information is correct for your state on the slide. Now, a suggested talking point for this slide Could be, what questions do you have about these two performance measures? However, if your participants haven't seen the performance measures before, you might spend a lot of time in person during the meeting discussing just what the performance measures are. So before the meeting, it's a great idea to give participants an assignment to review performance measure 2 and 3 and the implementation manual. And by giving this assignment ahead of time, you can talk more about the results instead of explaining what the performance measures are. So as a reminder, the performance measure manual is located on the NEDARC website, and it's easy to just send the pages you need to the participants. If you're meeting in person, you can also make paper copies for people in the meeting that might not have reviewed the pages yet. The same strategy works really, really well for the paper survey. So you would do the same thing. You can set an assignment for all the participants to review the paper version of the survey, and then spend more in-person time on discussing the results and instead of explaining what the survey had asked. So again, having paper copies is always a great idea if you're meeting in person. And something that you could ask would be, what questions do you have about the survey and the way the data was collected? Meeting goals are really important. It sets the stage for what you're going to present, and it helps you to stay on track with a discussion. Here's an example of a goal that you could have for a meeting where you're discussing the results and identifying areas for you to work on in your state to make improvements. So you can change these goals, like I said before, to meet your needs. We absolutely love questions. So we encourage you to ask your participants several times during a presentation if they have any questions. Another important facilitation tool is to encourage participation with a suggested talking point, something like this. You could say, I would like for this presentation to be a little more interactive than our usual presentations. We have areas where I'll ask you questions and hope you feel safe enough to respond and provide your insights. No matter your background or area of interest, we'd like full participation from everyone. And you can let your participants know that by participating, everyone can avoid death by PowerPoint, right? We're going to go ahead and get our hands dirty. We're going to start with our response rate. We're going to talk about some demographics, and then we'll get into the performance measures. And in order to do this, I'm going to move my dock here. I want to transition to Tableau for just a few minutes to go over a couple of things. And most of you are familiar with Tableau. Some of you may have a lot of experience. Some of you maybe not so much, and that's okay. We're going to go to the Explore button over here. And we're going to click on the EMS Surveys project folder. And then we're going to come to the 2020 EMS Performance Measure Data with Past Years folder. And from here, we're going to click on Overview. And all this information is going to be in the notes section of the slide, so you won't get lost when you're trying to find things in Tableau. That's the good news. And like I mentioned before, thank you so much, Erica, for letting us borrow your state today for demonstration. And we can see that in the Overview tab, you can click on your state or territory here. You can also click on your survey year. So we can look at 2017, 2018, and 2020. And I'm just going to stick with 2020 for now. And we can see that there are several tabs at the top here. We have the agency map, the EMSC2 trending tab, the EMSC3 trending tab. We have demographics, PEC overview, and skill checking overview. So I want to just kind of show you what's on each tab before we go much further, because you're going to see a lot of these things coming up on slides in the slide deck. So I kind of wanted to orient you to where they are. So this overview is just an overview of the data collection period with response rates, performance measure information for EMSC 2 and 3. Our agency map tab is going to show us a map of our state where EMS agencies are located and designated by basic life support, intermediate life support, and advanced life support. And there's lots of filters that are fun there to use. This is the EMSC2 trending over time. And we have graphs here that show our EHB numbers for EMSC2 trending over time. And then we also have one-to-one analysis here. The EMSC3 trending has similar information for our EHB numbers trending over time, and then one-to-one analysis. We have our demographics tab, which shows us agency by highest licensure, type of providers reported, pediatric call volume by number and percentage of agencies. So we have our PEC overview, which shows us pediatric emergency care coordinator information, other information about PEC activities, agencies who have a PEC, and then skill checking overview, which goes over the use of pediatric specific equipment, percentage and type of method or skill checking that's reported, breakdown of the score and frequency. We have some filters up here on the top right, and we also have the use of pediatric specific equipment matrix. So there's a lot of really great data in Tableau that we can refer to when creating our slide deck or editing our slide deck. So I'm just going to go back to the slide deck now. And to start us off, we have our state EMS agency results. And you can see here that this is just a template. And so we have, you know, some sample data right here. And we want to change this out. We want to take the same information, but make it from our state. So we're going to go to Tableau. And again, we're back in our overview tab. And this really cool tool down on the bottom left in our start menu, you want to type in Snipping Tool. And Snipping Tool will pop up a box, and you want to scroll over New for New Snip and click on it. And it'll give you this pointer right here. And you just want to position this where you want it to go and click on your left mouse button, hold it down and drag it all the way to over the information that you're trying to capture. And you release your mouse button and you have a really nice picture here that has captured your data. Then you're going to click on Edit. You're going to click on Copy, and you're going to leave this open. You can just minimize it. You're going to go back into your PowerPoint. You can right click and click on Paste, or you can click on Paste up here in the top left. And there you have Wisconsin's numbers. And it's really important. This will come back to haunt you if you do not delete the sample data. You don't want to be showing someone else's data. So go ahead, you can delete that. You can also delete change your state data here, just as a reminder that you actually did it. And there you go, you've got these numbers. And what you're going to want to focus on with this slide is really talking about the number of respondents, maybe the number of people that were surveyed, your response rate. Talk about cleaning and how, you know, there are agencies that did not respond to 911 and there were duplicates, and those were removed from the performance measure calculation. You can also see lower down in Wisconsin, they actually surveyed 3 Indian Health Service or tribal agencies, which is great information for their state. But this is also not part of their performance measure calculations. And so these particular ones were excluded. So you can see how you can change this information a little bit to really kind of hone in on things that are important for your state. The same thing you can do with demographics. Like I mentioned before, if you were to go into Tableau, you can come to the demographics tab and you could create a snip of agencies by highest licensure for your state and go back in. You could copy and paste this back here. In this section on the top right, this blank, you could put information that you want to share about agency licensure. You could say something similar to, you know, here we see the agencies in our state by a breakdown of their type. So we see that the majority are BLS agencies, followed by ALS agencies, and then ILS agencies. So you can find providers as well in that same tab in Tableau. In the demographics tab, you can go to the maps. I don't know about you, but I'm a visual learner and I really like the map section in Tableau. Be able to kind of come in here, go to an agency map and really highlight and focus on specific things that I'm trying to look for. You can see that you could filter by urbanicity if you wanted to just see the rural agencies in your state. And you could talk about rural areas and how things are going. You can also hover over an agency and get some information. You can see here in Little Rice Fire Department that they have more EMR responders than they do paramedics or EMTs. You can see that if you go back here, you can filter by all. If you wanted to come and look at pediatric volume, You could filter by high and medium high volume if you wanted to, and look at those in your state. So there's lots and lots of possibilities for things that you could do to kind of snip a picture and enter it into your PowerPoint for some great information. And again, there are talking points. There's the file path on how to get to where you need to go in Tableau. Again, if maybe you don't want to use a map in your state, maybe this is something that's not going to be meaningful to you, but if you look over here on the left-hand side, if you don't want to use a slide, you can easily right-click on it, and you can click on Hide Slide, and that'll keep the information available to you still instead of deleting it, so that if you want to go back and use it, you can, or you can just hide it there so that it's not going to be a part of your presentation. You can certainly unhide it by clicking on it again, and you can move forward with the information that you want to share, exchange. So something interesting that, you know, we think about when we're doing data and we're telling a story with data are, you know, what does the data mean to you when you look at it, and how can it be helpful for your state? So I just want to throw that out there to y'all. I'm going to delete this right here, and I want you to look at this slide for pediatric call volume. Say you snip this out and you're looking at it. For all of our managers out there, when you look at the slide, what is the data telling you, and how can it help your state?
Hey, Jane, we have a few things coming into the chat box that I'll just read off now. Catherine says, I'd use for pediatric skill retention discussions.
Okay. Pediatric skill retention discussions, that's great.
Autumn says the largest percentage of agencies have the lowest volume of calls. And Samantha adds, most agencies have low, medium pediatric volume calls. Call volume.
Right. Right, exactly. That's a really good point.
A few more coming in. Corolla adds that Catherine's point was great, and that she would include halo incidents. Joe Stack adds, one thing it shows is that almost all agencies have pediatric runs. I've talked to many agency chiefs who tell me we never see a kid.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Rachel Ford adds, would need to emphasize frequency of training and practice opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Kendrick comments, helpful and priorities for outreach. If we have an agency with high calls and low training goals, let's work there first.
Yeah, exactly. Those are great interpretations of the data, as well as things that you're noticing, ways to implement this data to help your state. I love the stories that you're telling already, and what that can translate to into some meaningful outreach or some meaningful training, ways that you can kind of help these agencies. So thank you so much for your comments on that. I'm going to move forward.
Want to just add one more. I missed one. Autumn just commented that the low number of call relate to skill and competencies as well.
Exactly. That's so true. That's very true. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to EMSC 3, you know, about skills checking and training and those types of things. When we're thinking about how to present information about EMSC 2, we can take things right from the performance measure manual, similar to how Lenora showed us earlier about how beautifully things are kind of laid out so that you can quickly find things. And because it's online, you can also take snips of certain sections of it as well. It's really important to make sure that you are explaining the performance measure and its goal. You want to review the performance measure manual and the accompanying, there is a video that you can show as well, to understand why this measure was created. And I just want to give everybody a quick reminder that we have these great videos on the NEDARC website, and the links are located in the notes section of the slide deck. And they really do discuss why these performance measures are important. So we have one for EMSC 2 and EMSC 3. You could certainly share these in a meeting to start discussion about the performance measure. You could give them out ahead of time if you want, just so that people have a great understanding. And then of course we want to highlight the 2020 target of 30% down here as well. You're also going to want to explain the definition of a pediatric emergency care coordinator. And in the notes section, we also have a lot of great resources from Mary Ann Gaucher-Hill and others for studies that have been done, peer-reviewed literature and evidence-based research that really kind of backs up the importance of a PEC. We also want to highlight the percent of agencies that have a pediatric emergency care coordinator. And again, if you want to get your state results, you can just go to Tableau again, back to that overview tab. And you can go down here and find your percentage for your state and EMSC 2. Once you change that, you could discuss it. Say, for example, your state is at 27%. You could say, we're at 27%, just below the 30% target, but we've actually come a long way since the previous data collection period. How can we do to keep this momentum going and meet that target measure? We also have slides that talk about state data over time. Again, you would change this and filter it to your state or add your state there. Trending over time, we can see has this red trend line right here that shows the amount of participants in 2017 and 2018 versus the number of participants in 2020. And you can compare survey years that way. You can see that the survey participants almost doubled from those 2 years. You can talk about highlights, things like you increased your number of PECs by 60, which is really great. You could also look at the trending one-to-one analysis, and I really like this because it might be closer to what QI is, and agencies who are participating in the survey regularly. So these are participants that took part in the survey both years, and you can see that their trending line is up even just a little bit higher. So it shows improvement there. Likewise, you can show the survey questions. If you want to focus on just a singular question from the survey, that might be a point of interest for you and your stakeholders. In order to understand more about the data related to pediatric emergency care coordination, it is important to look at the questions. And incidentally, the term PEC was not used or asked or introduced in the survey. The survey focused on an individual who coordinates pediatric emergency care. And this is important when you communicate your data results. So if you, see, numbers on a survey, but you realize that not all EMS agencies understand what a PEC is, you can kind of tailor that a little bit more. We can also see the breakdown of results by agency. And I'm going to have you look at this slide now. And again, I want you to tell me, what is the data telling you about the information on this slide? And how can it help your state? Let's ask that question one more time. What do you see on this slide? What's the data telling you? And how could it help you in your state? I'll give you just a minute to answer that question.
We have a few responses that are coming in. Loriana says close to half of the agencies represented has no PEC. Samantha says a huge portion of agencies do not have a PEC or are interested in a PEC. And Amanda says people may not have a clear understanding of what a PEC is, so they say they don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And then Renee adds that it tells me that I have services interested in having a PEC. Start there.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel
Absolutely.
Ford comments, there's a good number of PECs that oversee more than one agency. Maybe they would be interested in picking up one or more that are interested in a PEC. Erica Kane adds that lots of interest in adding a PEC. Loriana adds, I found that asking for an agency pediatric point of contact helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
E.T. Edwards also comments that the agencies that plan to add a PEC can be directly reached out to and offered resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I really like the variety of things that you all came up with, because it's telling each of you something different as you're thinking about your state. You all know your agencies best in your state and how your state functions. And so that's going to help you to tailor the messaging behind what you might put forward to your stakeholders on a slide like this. Just a few minutes left here. And I kind of want to go over just there are a lot of slides that ask some really great questions. You can change up these questions. Again, you can go in and talk about PEC duties. And there's several slides in here that ask questions about PECs, duties and responsibilities that you can look through if you want to use them. They're great. If you don't want to use them or create your own questions, you can. And in the slide deck, we see that EMSC 3 is laid out very similar to the way EMSC 2 was. So we've got use of pediatric specific equipment now that we're transitioning to. And again, making sure that people understand the goal for this measure, as well as the EMSC target for 2020 at 30%. You can use this slide to talk about pediatric training and why it's so important when we have so few field encounters to have additional training because your skills do deteriorate over time. This graph is taken from the EMSC manual, from the performance measure manual. And the calculation for reporting progress in relationship to performance measure 3 is really important to understand. Respondents were asked a series of questions that put them in 3 of these squares in the matrix here. And one's related to a skill station, one's for simulated events, and one's for field observations. Specifically, respondents were asked how often their agency practiced or demonstrated these 3 types of skills. And if you look at the chart, you'll see numbers in each box. If the total of the 3 boxes, 1 in each area, was equal to 6 points or higher, then that was considering they met the current EMSC goals for skill training. So you can remember this by knowing that the rows are skills and the columns are the frequency that those skills are demonstrated, as shown here. Again, you can change on this side your state results for EMSC 3. From that overview tab I showed you, you can talk about state data over time. You can talk about one-to-one analysis. And you can even go to this really great matrix to really do a deep dive into the frequency of the 3 skill checking areas. Again, if this is something that you feel would be confusing to your audience or something that you don't want to spend a lot of time on, you can go ahead and right click and hide this slide. Right here, you could ask a participant. This is another facilitation tool, which you could ask a participant to read this quote here that says, a recent study found that the availability of a PEC in an agency is associated with increased frequency of pediatric psychomotor skill evaluations. Here we've got breaking down the score by frequency of training, and you could look at this and ask yourself the question I've been asking today: what is the data saying and how could it help improve things in your state? We've got the percent and type or method of skill checking reported, and we can see that field observations here are not as frequent as simulation or demonstration skills. So we've got different slides here as well for questions that you could ask your target audience here. What opportunities do you see? How can we turn low scoring agencies into high scoring agencies? What areas do you think, and you can adjust this to meet your state name, what areas do you think we should consider working on to make improvements in this measure? Again, you can use some of these, you can use all of these, none of these if you want to. Make up your own questions. And then it's important to thank all of our agencies who responded. You really want to address this with your stakeholders and just say, they work so hard in our state, really, vouch for the hard work that they do and the importance they have in helping our pediatric patients. This would be a good time to review your meeting goals to see if where you started is where you actually ended up. And you can just repeat the slide and discuss it. You can go ahead and look at next steps. Thank you, Brayden. You can go ahead and look at next steps, and there's an activity that you can do with this. You can actually, while you're talking about next steps, you could pull out a whiteboard or, a great big piece of paper and brainstorm some activities together about what your next steps are, or maybe you can rank the next steps in order of importance. You can make assignments. It's a really good time to have interaction with your target audience. Sometimes it's really great to end on a high note with a nice quote. This one's by Nelson Mandela that says, "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again, which is really inspiring there. And of course, it's always been my thought and opinion that the best ideas are generated probably 20 minutes after the meeting has ended. That's when ideas really start kind of flowing because you're thinking about things and you've had time for it to marinate a little bit. So go ahead and put your contact information in here, your name, your title, your organization, your email and phone. Give people plenty of opportunity to reach back out to you to share those great ideas they have after the meeting. And then, of course, thank your stakeholders for all that they do and for participating in this discussion. I'll just share that same sentiment. Thank you so, so much for your participation. These are great things to discuss, to talk about. It's so important for all of us to understand your concerns and to be able to kind of work together to make improvements all throughout EMSC. So at this point, I'm going to ask, does anybody have any questions about anything that we talked about for the slide deck today? Any questions for me about the slide deck?
Oh, Autumn says, how long does your presentation usually last?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's going to be based on how you tailor it. This slide deck, like I mentioned, is available in the Google Drive for you. And I've also going to have Patty upload. I have a presentation template that you can use, a presenter's presentation template. That's a paper version of everything that we've seen here, including the notes for each slide. And really, it just depends. It varies. If you're taking a bunch of slides out, then your presentation might be shorter or longer. I checked with Meryl Pine, who actually had experience with this, and she said that she doesn't remember the exact amount of time it took to kind of edit things around, but it was a good investment for what she did put into it and not too long. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if you're asking how long does it take to do the presentation or how long does it take to edit it, but yeah, this is hopefully helpful and useful to you to make it easier.
I did upload your slide deck presenters template to the chat box as well. If you want to download that. We're getting some comments that it was bold and well put together. Thank you for the slide deck.
Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to your NEDARC TA. And we look forward to the rest of the workshop. Thanks so much.